Metaverse.
Greetings, I'm Shad, and you might have noticed I'm wearing my full adventuring kit at the moment because we have a very important topic, and that is looking at the classic Dungeons & Dragons monsters and what perhaps it might be like to fight them in real life, okay? Because certain mechanics that operate in a role-playing game with the rules and things might not necessarily play out the same as real life. Now, we've got the classic monsters like dragons and stuff, and I've already done videos talking about dragons. I want to talk about the classic D&D monsters that are also at the same time a little bit more obscure. If you play D&D, you've probably come across them, but in terms of mainstream fantasy, they're actually not as common per se. Hence why I'm wearing my standard adventuring gear, because it'll be interesting to see if my loadout here would be appropriate to handle all these specific monsters, or if I might actually want to change it up. And I've done kind of videos on this, what best weapons for a fantasy adventure and stuff. And in those videos, I came to the conclusion that you kind of want weapons that can handle a wide array of enemies. But if there are kind of rumors that let you know, yeah, there's a dragon in that den, or a certain type of monster over there, a Medusa or something like that, then you could prepare more specifically. And so what I have here, I have my trusty, big two-handed sword. And in terms of the types of swords, yeah, something that has reach, can probably hit multiple opponents, do a lot of damage, and if you are not needing a shield, okay, big two-handed sword right there in my back scabbard, good to go. Got a trusty knife, but of course I would be like, I don't know, some type of ranger knight hybrid, because I have my warbow. And yes, this, like, I've done whole videos on shortbow, does not mean weaker, okay? This is actually a high poundage warbow. It's 110 pound, and it's actually really suited for the adventure because it's much smaller and easy to carry around. I'll have a video talking about the best type of bow for an adventurer, and I do mention that shorter would be better because I try out longbows in that. And yeah, so if I was adventuring, this is the bow I'd carry with me. It's so convenient, easy to put anywhere, and very light, but also very powerful. And I feel I'd be fairly decently equipped, and what's also good, my mobility is still quite functional, because I did a whole video like, how many weapons would you end up carrying? Being properly equipped, let's see how well this loadout would fare against some classic monsters, and if I might need to use more specific tactics. I'll need to wear my very authentic adventuring glasses for this. The Kobold, yes! So the Kobold is a very classic D&D monster. It's one of the lower tier, difficulty monsters. And as this text says, Kobolds are short, reptilian humanoids with cowardly and sadistic tendencies. Interesting. In fact, if we have a look at the armor class is 15, but +2 from leather armor, Gambison type equivalent. So, alright, giving us some insight. They spend most of their time fortifying the land around their lairs with traps and warning devices such as spiked pits, trapwires, attached to crossbows and other mechanical contraptions. They're cunning creatures. In terms of combat, they like to attack with overwhelming odds, at least 2 to 1. Good tactic, so you're most likely going to be facing multiple, kobolds in one encounter. Or trickery. Should the odds fall below this threshold, they usually flee. However, they attack gnomes on sight if their numbers are equal. They begin a fight by slinging bullets, closing only when... stones. Closing only when they can see that their foe has been weakened. Whenever they can, kobolds set up ambushes near trapped areas. They aim to drive enemies into the traps, where other kobolds wait to pour flaming oil over them, shoot them, or drop poisonous venom onto... Alright, kobolds are very crafty creatures. There was one item of kit that I wasn't wearing that I'm wearing now, because you cannot forget this one. Absolutely. No matter what adventurer you are, alright, doesn't matter what armor you're wearing, if it's leather, gambison, chainmail, you should never go anywhere without your helmet. Absolutely. And so this is actually my full kit, because this is an important thing to remember. When I was reading about the kobolds, and they said that they like to basically use slings to begin an encounter, that could be an issue. Slings can be rather dangerous, but they have a massive weakness. Metal armor, especially if you're wearing a full helm like this right here. And so as a result, for my own kit, the bullets that they throw, the small stones, are actually not that much of a risk to me, and I would be able to survive the potential, ambush that they set. Other types of traps could be an issue. For instance, if they have tripwires that are connected to crossbows and stuff, that could be a problem. Snare pits and everything like that. But say they didn't have any of the aura, we could see them and avoid them if we had like a good rogue who was searching out the traps, okay? The initial encounter with those slings wouldn't be too much of an issue. And this is where we come to something interesting, where the real world obviously operates differently to a role-playing game based on rules, where in the role-playing game, if they, like, the armor I'm wearing effectively would be what? Breastplate or maybe half plate, and so if without magical enchantments and everything, my armor class according to 3.5 rules would be something, if I give myself what, a +2 dex, might even be too generous, but let's just go with that. My armor class could be something around the 16 to 18 range, okay? The thing is though, if they just roll high enough and they even have +1 or a couple to their attack roll, there's a good chance that they could still damage me, all right, with the slings. Slings don't do a lot of damage in, you know, our D&D rules. Now, that might be appropriate if I was wearing armor. Not wearing armor, slings can be lethal. And it's a bit of a contradiction that slings do so little damage when in actual fact they can kill people with a good shot, and it doesn't seem like the damage rating for slings allow that in the rules. In real life, they have that potential, but that potential is almost nullified completely if you're wearing proper armor. And like, depending on the size of the bullet, might even have trouble getting through the eye slit. And so, short of a 1 in a million shot, I am mostly protected, nigh invulnerable to slings, not going to be an issue. And it doesn't matter what they roll, okay? Slings, for the most part, will not be able to offend someone wearing proper armor. So aside from the sling, kobolds also use spears. Good choice for them. They're shorter, they get range. The thing is though, the size of the spear that they are using, if we can see that right there, in comparison to their height, is only about yay big. It's not a very long spear at all. It's a small javelin in comparison to a real person. And so even though it gives them a little bit of reach, it's not actual reach in comparison to a full-size person. And then as a result, my current kit actually works quite effectively to take out kobolds. And so I just get the sword out, and this type of sword, look at the size of this thing, right? Is actually quite suited to taking on kobolds because they attack in greater numbers. And so by having such a long blade here, a good wide slash would actually offend more than one opponent and has a good chance of not only keeping them at bay, but killing more than one in a good solid strike. And so big sword like this, quite effective, and the cutting ratio also enables you to potentially do higher damage. It's not to say things like halberds wouldn't be effective, they really would. The high damage, you would have a much higher chance of killing a kobold in one good solid hit with something like a halberd than even my big sword, okay? The damage potential is just so much higher. But then of course we come to the trusty bow, okay? Instead of getting yourself into dangerous ranges, just take them out with the bow right here. And yes, you can shoot a bow wearing armor, even with a helmet, right? You just go down and you can get the job done like so. I think kobolds, yeah, I feel well prepared for a kobold, but they're not the only creatures. We have a number to get to. In fact, all the tactics that we're kind of coming to in this discussion, I might want to record them and keep track of what would be the best types of, weapons to use against certain monsters and stuff. Good thing, I have a very useful tool to help me out with that. And that is Campfire on mobile. If you haven't learned what Campfire is, it's the sponsor of this video and it's a phenomenal writing tool. Its primary function is to help world build and write and organize all your notes. The browser version and offline desktop app have actually been out for a while, but now there is Campfire mobile as well. Seriously, Campfire's interconnected tools make for a seamless world building experience where you can quickly reference information, link story elements together, and collaborate with other users in one place. The app keeps your work safe with unlimited cloud storage on secure servers. Your work even updates across platforms, making it easy to work on whatever device you prefer. You can keep track of characters, creatures, locations, magic systems, maps, and more. It even has a word processor so you can write your whole book on your phone if you want. And best of all, guys, the Campfire mobile app is absolutely free. I have the Shadow of the Conqueror setting up here, and I could look up my characters in the thing. There's Dalen Namara. If I click on him here, we have the titles, the family relations, relationships, legal marriage status, his gender, of course, eye color, birthplace, and all the information is easily referenceable. And then if I go back, I can look up one of my other characters, Arik. Again, all the information there, and that's just one of the things, because that's just the characters, and so everything is here on the mobile app, easily accessible. And when they say the mobile version is 100% free, they really mean that. It has no ads, limits, or in-app purchases. So you can try Campfire on iOS and Android and start writing awesome stories with all these great tools right away. Just look up Campfire in the App Store or go to campfirewriting.com. It is a phenomenal tool, really recommended, and, you know, keep track of all the weaknesses of these monsters that we'll be looking at. So thank you very much to Campfire for sponsoring this video. Okay, so this monster is a classic one, but you don't see it much outside of D&D, yet it has really interesting elements that could change up the way that you'll fight it, and that is the Mimic. What's the Mimic? So Mimic is a creature that can essentially shapeshift to objects of similar mass to its own size, and it can change the pigment of its own skin. And as a result, it often turns itself into treasure chests to lure would-be adventurers. And as soon, this is the crazy stuff, it has adhesive skin. When you touch the Mimic, you get stuck to it, and then it morphs into like some monstrous, you know, chest thing with teeth. It also can morph arms out of it and grapple you, and start to crush you. And so Mimics are a bit crazy, and this is the description they have. The Mimic is a strange and deadly creature that can change its pigmentation and shape. It uses this ability to lure hapless victims close enough to slay them. It is said that Mimics are not natural creatures, but were created long ago by a now forgotten wizard. Gee, thanks, mate. Flippin' have you ever thought of like Mimics there? They're nasty, right? Ever since these terrible things have served to guard treasures. It's a good thing to throw into a treasure room to guard it. Yeah, I agree. Mimic can have almost any dimensions, but usually is not more than 10 feet long. A typical Mimic has a volume of 180 cubic feet, 5 feet by 5 feet by 6 feet, and weighs about 4,500 pounds. Well, this thing is heavy. This is real. This is a big thing. 5 feet by, so it's almost about 5 feet, about yay big. But actually no, 6. So Mimics can be big. Wow. A Mimic often surprises an unsuspecting adventurer, lashing out with a heavy pseudopod. So that's like a limb. It grows like limbs and it can hit things. The creature does not necessarily fight to death if it can succeed in extorting treasure or food from a party. Interesting. So you could just appease it. If you're aware of it, it's like, I just give it some treasure or some food that you might not want to part with, and it might not have it on you, okay? Now, yes, it has the adhesive thing. It talks about it here. Crush attack, yes. Mimic deals 1d8 plus 4 points of damage with a successful grapple. So basically, yeah. Mimic can assume the general shape of any object that fills roughly 150 cubic feet. Should not stable the size. All right. Interesting. Part of the adhesive ability that a Mimic has is that every time you strike it with a weapon, there's a chance your weapon will get stuck on the creature. So unless you're able to kill it in one blow, that's a problem. That's actually a very significant issue that you want to deal with. And if you are aware and you know the abilities of a Mimic and that your weapons could get stuck in it, if you come across it, the first tactic you would want to do is not hit it with melee weapons. You would go straight for ranged, get some distance, and just fill it full of arrows and damage as much as you can. That's the primary thing. The danger is, what if you weren't aware that it was a Mimic and you actually thought it was a chest and you tried to open it and your hands are stuck to it? Oh boy, that's a problem. Let's hope that it was just one hand, because if one hand is stuck to it, okay, all hope is not lost, but you are now in very close range. So close that your big sword is not going to do much help, because, again, you're touching the thing. And so the next best weapon you could do if you're stuck is grab your dagger, okay, and just stab it to death. Now, daggers, in my opinion, have been mistreated in lots of role-playing games for the low damage they are given. I have a whole video discussing about how role-playing games get damage wrong. Check out the whole video. There's a lot of detail in that. And one of the takeaways in that video is that a dagger can easily do as much lethal damage as like swords and other large weapons. Like, think about a spear. A spear usually has a much smaller blade on the end and will penetrate nowhere as deep, or just equivalently deep even, as you could get with a good solid stab from a dagger, yet a spear does way more damage than a dagger does. It's a bit of an error in terms of how they operate in that regard, because a dagger is actually capable of doing severe lethal damage. And if you are up close, stuck to a mimic, and you just start laying into it, start hacking it, and you'd have your armor on, and you just go, ah! And if you want to slice it down and just carve it up and you're stabbing it, you would actually be in a position to do huge amounts of damage, because this is one of the things. People think, oh no, now you're so close to the mimic that you are completely vulnerable, but guess what? The mimic is really close to you, and if you're stuck to it, it is stuck to you, and don't forget that you are a dangerous individual as well. The mimic could be more scared of you, should be more scared of you for what you could do to it than what it can do to you. And even if you can't use your large weapons, you're so close that this thing right here should be able to take out that thing in short work, especially if you go crazy, just like, because you're stuck to it. You would be able to kill it pretty quickly, because by being so close, it's not going to be able to dodge you, okay? And it doesn't really have any defenses or shields. It didn't look like it had great armor. In terms of its armor, it has 15, -1 for size, +5 natural armor. So its hide is a little bit thicker than the average human. I still think with a good solid, you can get through it. The dexterity bonus will basically be nullified, okay? It can't dodge you being that close. So take advantage of that, lay into it, and I think you could make short work of that mimic. Wow, speed is slow. Well, you could just outrun a mimic really easily. Speed is only 10 feet per round. Your average speed in D&D rules is 30 feet. So outrunning the thing is easy. That's not much of a threat if you can just outrun the thing. But very much so. If you recognize it as a mimic, you can just, if you have enough space, just shoot it. Arrows, and you can keep your distance. Just move, shoot, and it won't be able to catch you at all. According to, this is 3.5 rules. Things might have been slightly changed. Space attack is grapple. Now, its hit points is 52, so it's got a bit of flesh that you'll need to carve up to do it. But remember, again, daggers, they can do far more damage than they should in D&D, especially up close. Damage is one of those things that D&D has trouble with reflecting. I know it works great for the mechanics of the game. I'm bored. I get that. But in real life, people are much easier to kill, and they're much more vulnerable, and weapons do far more damage than is often depicted in the rules. Alrighty, next classic D&D monster that you don't see often outside of D&D, but has become pretty popular, the owlbear. This has become more and more popular in recent memory. The owlbear was never a very common, regular monster, but they've caught on. And look, it's a bit of a silly thing. It's just like I don't know, we'll combine two monsters. Say, I guess a griffin is the same thing. We'll combine an eagle and a lion. We get a griffin. But they didn't call it a eaglin or a ligal. So I think, I know, it's an owl and a bear. We'll just call it an owl bear. You could give it a better name. Anyway, so become fairly popular. These things, they're big, all right? So a bear is already a fearsome creature to try and slay, okay? A bear by itself, really aggressive, could fit into a monster manual quite nicely, but an owlbear, the abilities of an owl on top. They should have good eyesight then, we'll see. Owlbears are extraordinarily vicious predators with a reputation for ferocity, aggression, and sheer ill temper. All right, yeah, okay, nasties. They tend to attack nearly anything that moves without provocation. All right, okay. Scholars have long debated the origins of the owlbear. The most common theory is that a demented wizard created the first specimen by crossing a giant and an owlbear. You know what probably happened?
Hey!
Yeah?
What the hell is this?
Oh, you didn't really give any specific guidelines about mating.
Full-grown male can stand as tall as 8 feet and weigh up to 1,500 pounds. Adventurers who have survived encounters with the creatures often speak of the bestial madness they glimpse in its red-rimmed eyes. So in combat, owlbears attack prey, any creature bigger than a moose, okay, on sight, always fighting to the death. Okay, this is significant because in a lot of regular animals, if you injure it enough to make it think like, okay, this is not worth the risk, this meal, I'm already getting, not worth it, they'll flee. But of course, some animals are willing to fight to death, but that all owlbears are willing to fight to the death actually make them more dangerous, significantly so. They slash with claws and beak, trying to grab their prey and rip them apart. So beaks are interesting. I've seen birds of prey, what they can do with those beaks. They gouge and can rip flesh and stuff. Is that inherently more dangerous than a maw with teeth? I think it's about equivalently as ouch. So the real question that you'd have with an owlbear like this is how well can it get through armor? Certain jaw strengths could, bend and crush armor, and it depends on the type of armor. Brigandine doesn't have structure, and so that could still crush you even if the claw can't dig into your flesh. So armor isn't necessarily a guaranteed protection. And the problem with the owlbear, it's so big that its whole mouth could probably fit around the head. And even if won't crush your head, they have enough strength to just throw you around. I watched a video the other day where a camel literally opened its mouth, grabbed a guy around the head, and he fully fit the head in the camel, fit the guy's head in its mouth, picked up the guy, just with the strength of its neck, and by the head, and threw him. A camel did that. This is a creature that's even stronger, and a relative size, camels on all four legs, but I'd say at least as big, or if you're not bigger. And so even a helmet might not save you if they could just wrap the thing out and throw you. So this is a dangerous creature, so dangerous, in fact, that one of the primary things you want to do, once again, is keep your bloody distance. So yes, we are relying on the trusty warbow. And once again, it doesn't look like a warbow, does it? But it's actually more powerful than many of longbows that you get, especially the ones on the market. On the market, it's really hard to find a 100-pound longbow. But 110-pound, and so just pin cushion it with as many arrows as you can. Get to some area where the creature is hard to reach, like if you can get on top of a cliff. They should be able to climb trees just like bears can, so that's not a guaranteed thing. Because if it's rushing you and you haven't killed it with enough, because it'll fight to the death. Okay, big sword. One of the advantages of a big sword is that you can use it like a spear and just hold it out. Because the next thing is, of course, a spear-like weapon. Either an actual spear or a halberd, and just let it hopefully run onto the thing. Look, it's a very dangerous creature to face. I'm not saying it's going to be easy by any means. But the tactics are keep your distance. If you can't kill it with a bow and arrow, do it with ranged weapons at a distance as far as you can, and use its own momentum against you. Because if it impales itself fully on, your weapon, and you can get it in the lungs or heart, that's a death blow, okay? Even if it doesn't die right away, but again, a single arrow that pierces the lungs, and so if you get it usually along the rib cage, there's a good chance that you'll pierce the animal's lungs, and it's going to die. It'll bleed out. And that's how, even just light 50-pound bows can take down deers, even moose, if you just right in the ribs, through the lungs, and hopefully even if you get the heart, that'll be really a death blow. So what you hope then to kill an owlbear is probably do an attack that has lethal potential, that's going to cause it to bleed out, or from internal bleeding or otherwise, right? So yeah, aim for the rib cage, hopefully puncture the lungs with an arrow, then run, or do something to get to safety. Put something in between you. Is it a tree? And just go around the tree or something like that. And then if you have a spear, maybe you can keep it at bay as it's trying to, rush you and stuff. The problem is, if they do rush you, try and put something in between you and them. But that's the kind of main tactic that you would want to go with. Still, tough creature to fight. But there are other things that the owlbear can do against you. For instance, it has an improved grab attack. To use this ability, an owlbear must hit with a claw attack. It can then attempt to start a grapple as a free action without provoking an attack of opportunity. Yeah, that's dangerous, because when it grapples you, even though it's using, its arms, its claws to grapple, it has a third weapon which is crazy dangerous, and that's its beak, okay? And that's something that we don't have when we're grappling something. We can try and bite, but it's not hugely effective. Your only option is, again, dagger. If it's grappling you, you're not going to be able to grab the sword. You won't be able to use your bow. Trust me, every adventurer should have a bloody dagger. Daggers are great, and they still could do great damage. If you had to say an armored arm or something, and get its maw, its beak, out of the way, stab it in the neck, in the eyes or something, you might be able to kill it while it kills you. I don't see how you'd be able to survive once it grapples. Magical armor, maybe. Full plate, maybe you'd be able to survive and then take it out with your dagger. That's one of its only special attacks, so oh boy, that's a nasty. Alright, now we're getting into some really, dangerous creatures. The basilisk. Oh my goodness, the basilisk. It is a reptilian monster that petrifies living creatures with a mere gaze. Surviving a fight with a basilisk requires either careful preparation or considerable good fortune. You know my first encounter with a basilisk? Yeah, everyone has their first run-in with these creatures in your own lives. So when I was playing Baldur's Gate, I think it was Baldur's Gate 1, or no, Baldur's Gate 2, more likely. And I went to a random part on the map, and just as I ran into these, reptilian creatures, I'll take them, all right? Everyone's turned to stone. I was like, holy crap. So I did not survive the encounter. Rest in peace, Shad. Yeah, as it says here, surviving a fight with a basilisk requires either careful preparation or considerable good fortune. So it's basically saying, you're probably gonna die. One of the things you start to realize when you look at the variety of ways in which you can die in Dungeons and Dragons worlds is how horrifying these worlds really are. They're nightmare hellscapes. There are so many ways to flip and die. Actually, I had a D&D character who was I structured him around the fact that he seemed like the only sane person in the world to realize how dangerous the world was, and so he was always hyper cautious, everything is death. They're about 6 feet long and 300 pounds. In combat, a basilisk relies on its gaze attack, biting only when opponents come within reach. Okay. So, we need to figure out this gaze attack. It's basically casts a spell, Petrified Gaze. And what it does, it turns people to stone permanently within a range of 30 feet. That's just under 10 meters. That is actually really short range. The way to beat a basilisk, shoot it from a distance. I mean, a good warbow can reach, 300 feet? Easy? So anyway, if a warbow can easily shoot, 300 feet, if not much longer, okay, wow, it's a gaze attack. It needs to be within 30 feet. That's really short. So there are limitations to it. But of course, if you're within that range, you need to make a fortitude saving throw, 13 to negate it. 13 isn't impossible to beat. And if you have mild, constitution and fortitude bonuses and stuff, you have over a 50% chance to survive the gaze attack. It doesn't seem like anything prevents it. A shield, if it just hits the shield, it'll petrify the shield and you. So it's not like... That's odd, because I have a feeling that if you were behind a stone or a tree and it did the gaze attack on the tree, it would petrify the tree and not you. So I wonder. This is an important bit of information to know about the basilisk's gaze attack. What makes it affect other objects? Do you need to be touching the objects? I have a feeling if it did a gaze attack on a tree and you're touching the tree, only the tree would be petrified. So what is the crossover point between an object that you're touching or holding and it hits you? Because my theory is if it's big enough, what if you had a big enough shield in which the shield could absorb the gaze attack and turn that to stone in front of you, and especially if it then just stands, you have a bit of cover that you can shoot around and fight around. Or the other thing is, if you can't be touching the thing, if you're touching anything that's getting petrified and you will be petrified as a result, okay, what are options to try and get around this? What if it was tied to some ropes or something like that? Or there was a quick release thing that as soon as you see it coming, you prepare an action, it tries to ready its gaze attack on you, and you drop the shield in front of you, and then you're not touching it, and the shield absorbs the gaze attack. So I think there could be tactics. Again, preparation, that's the thing, what the Monster Manual did say. You need to prepare for something like that, because if you didn't have something to absorb it, like you had a shield ready that you could drop or get cover or something like that, you're in a bit of trouble. But if you knew the general properties of a basilisk, okay, again, 10 feet isn't that far. You could spot it from 30 feet or 50 feet, even 100 feet away. And as soon as you see it, one, you could choose to just avoid the thing like the plague because of how dangerous they are. You don't want to get close enough. Or it's like, oh, I see a basilisk. Everyone got their bows ready, and just lay into the thing from a distance. Okay, then what if it starts charging you? Well, we'll check its speed. So a medium basilisk can move at 20 feet, and even a large one, 20 feet. So average speed for the human in the rules is 30 feet. You'll be able to outrun it. Now, it depends, because you could do a double action or sprint, which gives you the double movement. And if the basilisk is sprinting and you can only move 30 feet and it does a double action because you can move 30 feet and attack according to the rules and stuff like that. But you can shoot while running, okay? In reality, you wouldn't be limited where you have to stop. Seriously, you can shoot while running. Look at Lars Anderson, he does it all the time. And so, yeah, maintain your distance, kill it with arrows. Its armor class is 16. It has +7 natural. So it has a natural kind of, armor, scaly surface. Looks a bit like crocodile-like. It's not impenetrable. And I mean, warbows, yeah, they're made to punch through lower levels of armor. So we're talking about chainmail, and if it's made out of softer steel, it has a better chance of punching through that. And that sounds like this ranges that, basilisk kind of, but then again, well, actually, full plate, it's hard to gauge the effectiveness of armor in D&D versus the real world, because the armor usually is reflected on how much coverage it gives, not the material strength it has. And when you overcome someone's armor class in D&D, it's actually like you're finding a gap in the armor. You're not punching through it because the armor doesn't get damaged. And so armor works in an interesting way in D&D. I do it differently in my own roleplay systems. But as a result, the +7 natural could just be the difficulty in finding one of the gaps between its scales. But again, we don't know how strong those scales are. I still would say that a good, arrow shot from a warbow, especially if it's a war arrow. So war arrow, well, see, this is one type of arrow. And then you have another type of arrow with a 1/2 inch diameter, which is heavy, thick, and I'd say something big and chunky, like a proper war arrow, I would say has a very good chance of puncturing the basilisk's hide, if it's trying to gauge how strong it would be with its +7 natural. And so, yeah, from a distance, if you get in close, there's the tactics you could use. Try and shield cover would be the main thing. And interesting, if you're within 10 feet, this is the question, okay? Do you really need to maintain too much reach, or would you want to rush it? Its gaze attack seems to function from its eyes. So, all right, there is a tactic you would want to do primarily as the main thing to fight a basilisk if you're within 10 feet. And that is actually to grapple it. It's funny, you've been trying to avoid grappling all these creatures. The basilisk tries to rely on its gaze attack, which means it's probably not well practiced in using its claws and attacking in melee just to begin with. And so if you're within 10 feet and you have an option to move before it can shoot you with its gaze attack, you would want to rush the thing, jump on its back, and get behind its eyes, or get into an angle so it can't see you, grapple it from behind. Dagger once again. Dagger is the MVP of combat. People underestimate the dagger so much, when the dagger has killed more people in armor than nearly any other weapon, because the way you kill people in armor, immobilize them, pull out the dagger, and get them through the eyes. I get annoyed at how underappreciated daggers are, except for maybe rogues in D&D. But daggers only become viable for rogues because they're sneak attack. They're not actually viable based on their own inherent damage, when they should be. Seriously, your best option: see a basilisk. If you're already too close to get it out of range, rush the thing, jump on it, get behind its gaze attack so it can't see you, and just stab it to death. And then you probably have good chances of surviving. That is a good, solid tactic to do. There you go. All right. Next monster. Now we have the Displacer Beast. It's a classic one in Dungeons & Dragons. So the Displacer Beast is a savage and stealthy carnivore that resembles a puma in some respects. Oh, they can speak, they're intelligent. Have a conversation with the Telltale. Oi, calm down. I don't want to hurt you. I know you attack everything on sight, but you might be able to kill us, but you'll still be injured. Just think about it. Do you want to be nursing a wound for the next month? Okay? You don't have a cleric to heal. I've got a cleric. So there's chances you're... Oh, yeah, exactly. That's right. Calm your farm. We're just passing through. Bloody Displacer Beast. Combat. Displacer beasts tear at opponents with their tentacles and bite foes get close. Yeah, they got interesting tentacles. They have a special ability, hence their name, displacement. A light-bending glimmer continually surrounds a displacer beast, making it difficult to surmise the creature's true location. Interesting. Any melee or ranged attack directed at it has a 50% miss chance. Hang on, okay, this depends, because I feel there are ways you could try and mitigate the mischance, alright? Unless, it depends how big this glimmer displacement area is, but there are ways around it, okay? So you have that mischance, unless you can locate the beast by some other means than sight. A true seeing effect allows you to see the beast's position, but see invisible has no effect. Interesting. It has a resistance to ranged attacks. A displacer beast has a +2 resistance bonus on save attacks, so that's just because it's hard to hit, I'd say. Displacer beast has a +8 racial bonus on hide checks. Makes sense. Okay, so this is very interesting. The main feature is this shimmering kind of illusion that causes their position to be indeterminable, giving you a 50% chance to miss the thing. But I actually feel there are ways to mitigate this because it has a set location and its displacement effect is in like a bubble or field, which means it must be within any location within a set area. And if you can make an attack that offends that entire area, the only way you would miss is if it actively dodges. And so what you want is a weapon with a very large cutting ratio and wide area of effect. And I'm wearing that perfect one right now. You know it. It is the big flaming two-handed sword, baby. Like seriously, something this big, right? If you do big, wide sweeping attacks, which just cover the wide area around you in a big swath, okay, that's going to offend a wide range. And if you can cut and offend that whole area where the displacement beast has its displacement field, abso-flippin'-lutely would you be able to have you would offend the area. It would have to dodge. It would only be, and so the 50% mischance, in my opinion, should be completely negated if you're using the right weapon. Now, the reason why the sword is so good about this is that, one, yes, its entire, blade has a chance of doing the damage. Contrasting that with a halberd, where you do a big, wide, sweeping attack like this, if the creature's actually closer than you predicted, you would hit it with the shaft and not the blade. It'll still do some damage, but harder to do lethal damage, whereas with a sword, it negates that completely. This is one of the reasons why I pick a big two-handed sword, and this is on the verge, but like in D&D, it would be classed as a great sword. It's a bit too big, way too big to be classed as a bastard sword. They don't really have, well, their longsword is one-handed, depending on which version you use. When we use the accurate modern-day terminology for the definitions of swords, longsword is a two-handed sword, Aragon sword, the ranger sword from Lord of the Rings. That's the classic longsword size. And this is sitting in the middle between that longsword and a real, proper historical greatsword, which is head height, and this, comes up around a little under my shoulder, and so it's actually would be classed as a war sword, but in D&D you would get greatsword. It's a greatsword. And greatswords, by the way, in D&D should have reach, and that's why this one, would have that effect. Because look at it, wide attack, and again, great pick for an adventurer because of the area of effect. Not only for the use that we're talking about here, but the fact that you could attack multiple opponents with these wide attacks, but also do these wide kind of sweeping even spin attacks, the way that they do with, say, Montantes and stuff, to offend all around you, to keep multiple opponents at bay. Big sword, very useful adventurer, and as a result, I think you could almost nullify the Displacer Beast's advantage with a weapon like this. So I would already be well equipped for it. If you didn't have a weapon like this, you would actually run into some issues with a higher chance of missing, such as using a halberd, an axe, a shorter sword, and one of the really difficult things would be like actual bows. So Displacer Beast would be uniquely effective at getting you to miss your shot with a bow. Unless you shoot really, in multiple areas, it'd be really hard to aim and hit a Displacer Beast with your bows. And so this is the type of creature where, shockingly, you would probably want to avoid using the bows. There are other advantages, though, that give you much higher chances against the Displacer Beast, and armor. It looks like its claw and biting attacks is similar in the range to, a cat of prey, like a tiger or something, or even a lion. And an armor would actually be very effective protection against a creature like this. Yeah, even its tentacle attacks, it's got like claw kind of things on the tentacles, but armor would be very effective protection against this creature. So, good solid helmet, good solid metal armor, not too much of a problem to deal with. And there we go. But this is the thing. There's actually hundreds of classic monsters that we could look at, all right? But this video has already been fairly detailed, also kind of long, but really fun. I enjoyed it. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. And if you did, I could absolutely do a follow-up video looking at more classic D&D monsters, the best ways and tactics you would actually want to use against them if they existed in real life. And because that's the thing, some advantages you'll lose, like in terms of like levels and other things like that, but you get some advantages because in real life, certain things are far more effective than what people realize, like the trusty dagger. And it's funny, like for instance, nullifying the Displacer Beast Gaze attack either way. I've played with some DMs who will be like, no, you can't nullify. It's logically, yeah, this is how it would work. It's like, the rules say you can't. And that always bothered me because in the real world, there are things you can do to circumvent things. And I feel a good, dungeon master or anything would acknowledge that some realities about that. But like I said, lots and lots of fun. Even more monsters we could look at. So if we get a heap of likes on this video and lots of comments down below requesting it, I can absolutely do a follow-up. It'll be great. And if I do, I hope to see you there. And until that time, farewell. I am off to fight some creatures. Let's go. Holy crap, it's fairies! Run!